This episode will be completely taken out of context. Welcome to the Fact Check This podcast. All right, Fact Check This podcast. And as I had said in the stream I did earlier today, I am joined by my buddy Clyde. It was weird when we actually met in person. Well, I guess when we met in person, it was at the LP State Convention. But then whenever my wife and I came up and hung out with you and your wife, the first time I met your wife in person at the Halloween party last year, I was calling you Clyde, and your wife thought that was really weird, which I don't know. That was interesting. I guess we go by different names with different people, and you don't really think about it. Like I remember being in college, and all of my dorm mates in college, they all call me by my nickname, Soupy. And
that's a great nickname.
And one time, a bunch of us are all hanging out, and somebody who knew me as Justin from class type stuff called me Justin, and everybody looked at each other. They're like, "Who the fuck is Justin?" I was like, "Me, I'm Justin." They're like, "Oh, we just thought you were Soupy." It's like, well, obviously my name isn't my legal name isn't Soupy. I have a real name.
Exactly. Well, Clyde is my real name. So it's funny, I didn't go by it when I was a kid. My parents called me Darren, which is one of my middle names. My name's Clyde Darren Adam Myers, and you cannot put four names on a tax form. So, but my parents actually changed my name when I was 2 because my grandfather Clyde didn't have a grandson named after him yet, so he got kind of bent out of shape about it. And so they attached Clyde to my birth certificate, my county birth certificate in Indiana. And but they did not change my Social Security card. So, which was all fine. Everything was fine until September 11th, 2001. And then suddenly everybody's identification suddenly became a big deal. So I had to go through all kinds of rigmarole to get my names to match up, and I didn't care if they dropped the Clyde off the birth certificate or added it to the Social Security. It didn't matter to me. I just wanted to be able to live my life, So eventually they were able to add the Clyde to my Social Security, but that was a hell of a process. But I've always kind of gone by Clyde as a nickname. People would find out that it was my real name, and then they'd just call me that forever. So I've gone by both of those things for my whole life. And then when I went to work where I currently work my 9-to-5 job, I went into the directory as Clyde because it's my name, it's my legal first name. So in my professional life, everyone calls me Clyde. So I've just been, for the last 15 years, I've just been used to being called Clyde. So I just introduce myself that way now.
So 9/11 is where your hatred for the government started, but for a completely different reason than a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't know if it started there, but yeah, that was pretty. It started. I think it really solidified just slightly after that when the Iraq War went down. I think that was Iraq War II.
Yeah, so that was an interesting time. That was. I was very staunchly Republican, had been raised that way and stayed that way through the first 4 years of Bush, and even campaigned for Bush into 2004. But then we get into 2005, 2006, 2007, and the war never ends. It's obviously never going to end. There's no real clear goal in sight for it. Things are not improving. And that was when I kind of hit the point. It was like, all right, this made sense for a little while, but what's the end game? And then I started to understand that for the military industrial complex, there is no end game. The end game is keep churning money. So
right.
That was what kind of really pushed me away from that neocon warhawk type of stuff, and kind of moved me in thinking about politics in a different way.
Okay. Well, that's good. I like hearing the origin stories, And and like, because I was kind of like on the other side. I wouldn't say it was like a staunch Democrat, but like I leaned heavily left, and I think I still kind of do. Like, I don't really feel like my opinions changed that much. I had some boneheaded views on economics, but you know what I mean. I was in my 20s. Who didn't? Uh, but yeah, like I was so against all that Iraq War stuff, and I just thought George Bush was uh, simultaneously the stupidest person who ever lived, uh, and just pure concentrated evil, uh, and then and I. But by that time, I was already skeptical of Democrats. I was, I had kind of lost that respect already. And then, Obama was campaigning back then, but that was the same time that the first Ron Paul run really caught fire. And and I would never have called myself anything like a Republican or even been adjacent to that. But like I could not stop watching Ron Paul highlights and full debates and everything. It was just a beautiful time.
And that was around 2008 was when I really kind of started to check out of politics entirely and just be like, yeah,
Mhm.
I don't really see that this is anything that can be fixed or that is going to impact me outside of like, as long as I'm got a good job and live my life, I'm probably going to be fine regardless of who wins. But like you said,
Right.
that's Ron Paul's first campaign. So I'm like showing people that I work with and stuff like clips of him saying stuff. It's like, all right, look, this whole thing is fucked, but he's really onto something. Like
Mhm.
there is absolutely no way in hell they'll ever let him win because he's saying all the right things.
Mhm.
These are the things you need to be paying attention to. And I don't know if anybody actually listened or not, but it really caught me. And then that carried on to 2012, where it's like he's back, and it's the same thing. And I still felt like, all right, he's onto something, and they will never ever ever let him get close to anything that
Right.
resembles real power because he is onto it.
Right.
And so I continue to like really stay out of politics for a long time. And then when Trump came on the scene in 2016, that was when I started to pay more attention to everything that had happened for 8 years of Obama. And it was like, all right, so there are some
Mhm.
things that need to be fixed, obviously. And he may not be very good, but he's highly entertaining. So then I started paying attention again. And I voted for Darrell Castle, the Constitution Party candidate. I was not a Trump guy in
So you're the
2016.
one.
Yeah, I'm the one. I'm the one. But he actually seemed to make the most sense, even though, and I knew there's like, I'll probably be the one person that votes for him, but that's fine. I'm fine with that.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm paying attention again, and it's kind of interesting. And so,
Yeah.
and then, that led to the COVID stuff, and that leads to you writing a book.
Yeah. Well, it's good transition, but also, you talked about trying to have some sway politically, like getting involved in politics. And then I think you and I got to a similar place in that, like, it's like you feel like Sisyphus rolling the rock up the hill. It's like you can put all this pressure and you can dedicate all this amount of your time, your finite mortal life, to you know trying to change the tides of the ocean, and it's just totally pointless. You know what I mean? It is what it is. They want it to stay the way it is. It's not going to change. Maybe someone like Trump, or you know, connect people who are already connected and well resourced. Maybe they can break down some walls, but I ain't gonna do that. You know what I mean? But I started thinking a little bit about just like, well, how can I have some influence on um, public opinion, right? And so that's kind of where writing the book began. It was like, okay, um, and you probably heard this before. A lot of people have been talking about this lately, but like, you know, you don't think enough people who consider themselves like freedom-loving, liberty-minded, small L libertarian, anti-communist, whatever you'd call it, not enough of those people make art, right? And that's starting to change, and I'm glad of it. But I wanted to kind of get in that vein and write something that I mean, it's a sci-fi novel. It's called In the Flesh. And though it's sci-fi, you kind of expect it to like look into the future, right? And it, it creates a universe, and I can talk about that a little bit here in a minute. But I really wanted it to reflect precisely the kinds of things that are going on in culture and politics in America right now. And the COVID fiasco was a huge one. So,
Okay, so from a sci-fi perspective, how are you going to go about weaving that sort of stuff into a science fiction story? Science fiction is very it's very broad. It can be used in a lot of ways, and you've seen science fiction authors use it to talk about a myriad of stuff. Asimov with all of the robot stuff.
mm-hmm.
Heinlein had a lot of political and social ideas in a lot of his writing. Herbert with Dune is very interesting in the religious aspects of it,
Mm-hmm.
plus the imperialistic aspects of it, and the ideas on war and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of themes to get tied in. So what's kind of the thread that gets us into looking at the COVID response as this goes? And keep talking. I need to do something, so I'm gonna turn my camera off for just a second.
Okay, yeah, go for it. Yeah, so I made this universe where it's basically illegal to die, or at least permanently so, because there's a giant pharma tech company that's developed a technique for human resurrection, right? Where so they can like clone a body. After a person dies, they can use their DNA to clone the body, reinstall a full backup of their memory and personality, and that backup is made from an always online embedded device that's with that person basically since infancy or conception. It's not really explained, but that's a product that they've branded as Soul Sync, right? And so you've got this always online backup device that's, for one, pretty much tracking everywhere you go all the time, all the interactions that you do, but then also uploading it to this backup server back at this giant biotech firm called Life Inc. And so they've partnered with the government of this republic, and so they've worked with the republic to pass legislation that mandates resurrection for everyone who ever dies. So if you die, you're coming back, whether you want to come back or not, right? And people relive these traumas over and over again. Like death is kind of funny, because when you write a book, you write a story where people can't die, you have to figure out a new way to put people in danger, so that the conflict actually works. And so one thing I tried to do was make death still horrible, right? They go through it, they experience it, but they come back, and then they have all of the memories and all of the traumas from that experience still with them. And so they want to avoid that at all costs still. And then some people just have gone through it over and over again, and they just want to leave. So I could go through the back panel synopsis if you want. It's pretty short, pretty brief, and kind of cuts right to the chase about what the thing's about. And then we can kind of dive into a little bit more of the COVID fiasco type of stuff if you like.
Yeah. Go through do the back panel, and then we'll kind of talk about. We'll talk more about COVID and how that kind of springboarded both of us into different levels of trying to be more active, trying to do stuff to get people. This can actually tie into some of the conversation that we were having before with talking to people in person, and the way that we interact with each other and interact with our communities since COVID and everything else. Like people, I think people interact and connect with each other differently now than what they did 4 years ago. You know?
Yeah, for sure. Well, we'll get it to the back panel here in a second, but that brings up a good point that like one of the big things that happened was the work at home revolution, right? Like my company used to, I'll probably should shy away from talking about work too much, but my company was very not against remote work, but they tried to keep that to a minimum. But during COVID, it was 100%, and then after COVID, we barely had anybody who even lived in the headquarters town. So and I think one of the things that's been a theme about sort of where the future's headed is stay in your pod, eat your bugs. You know what I mean? And so in this story, because resurrection is mandated, the overpopulation takes off, right? People can still reproduce, but they can't ever check out. So we have these overpopulated cities, so they have to cram people into tighter and tighter spaces. So we have people on different levels, from the surface all the way up to where Life Inc. is. Life Inc. is above the clouds. They just have to keep building it higher and higher and higher into the sky to accommodate the people. So all the elites live up in these above the cloud regions, and then all the lower class people live somewhere in the middle or all the way down. And as you go down, the spaces get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter, right? And so people in the middle levels, a lot of them are hunchbacks because they don't have the space to stand all the way up in their compartments, I call them. And then people lower than that, towards the surface of the earth, they are basically horizontal their whole lives. They can't even leave their pod. They just don't have the space, and they're just fed a government ration of cricket protein, and and that's their life. So we'll do the back panel here, even though I just did about half of it already. But so death is forbidden by law. The Republic, in collaboration with the formidable biotechnology giant Life Inc., mandates resurrection after each human death and makes a pretty hefty profit off each one. However, amidst rampant overpopulation, many individuals have tired of living their lives locked down in their compartments with only government-supplied rations of cricket protein and pornography to pacify them. Without even death to break the cycle, dissent starts brewing. Young journalist Quincy Washington awakens from death with fragmented memories. As he endeavors to reclaim his identity, resume normalcy, and win back his estranged girlfriend, he becomes entangled in a power struggle between the authoritarian Republic, Life Inc., subterranean resurgence, and an enigmatic hacker with a god complex, all while a digital ghost from the past pulls the strings from inside Life Inc.'s network. So stay in your pod, eat your bugs. You're forced to buy the product from the pharma company that you don't want, that doesn't help, that makes things worse, that everyone thinks is free but costs society a ton of money, resources. You know what I mean? So it's really just a critique on how our nation is being run by a big government, collusion between big government and big industry, specifically pharma, and and how that's at the expense of people like us, how they're stealing from us, forcing drugs on us that we don't want, and not just vaccines either, but like addictive opiates when a lot of people would be, when cannabinoids would be fine. Or at least would be a first choice option before putting opiates into people and causing this giant heroin epidemic. They keep control of the supply chains. So they poison the food, they poison our medicine, and then they have the fucking audacity to send us the bill for it all.
Well, and, I mean, when you're talking about like big pharma and how that runs everything, you and I both have kids similar ages. Like I remember when my son was in first grade, I think it was, and they wanted to diagnose him as ADHD and put him on all this medicine. I was like, no, he's a 7-year-old boy. He
Mhm.
doesn't sit still. He doesn't pay
Mhm.
attention
Mhm.
because that's the way 7-year-old boys are. And like,
Mhm.
sorry that all of the women are doctors, and oddly enough, pediatric doctors don't have children of their own. Makes no fucking sense. Like, have you ever been around a 7-year-old boy? Like, this
Yeah.
is the way they behave. But
That's not
like
just the way
but
they
the
behave.
first,
That's the way they learn.
right. But it's like the first instinct for every medical professional is,
Mhm.
all right, got to load them up on all the drugs that we've got to take away all of this stuff. Like, we don't want them to act like this, so we're just going to put them on all of this different stuff.
Mm.
And I fought it for 2-3 years,
Mhm.
and finally my ex ended up winning out and was able to find a doctor that would go around me to put him on this stuff. And now he's on like, now she's got him on half a dozen like random dumb bullshit that the solution to every single bit of it would be diet,
Mhm.
exercise. That's it. He like
Mhm.
she takes him to a chiropractor twice a month or maybe more than that, and got him on all these different medicines and stuff. I'm like, dude, like literally every bit of this could be solved by you run a mile every day, lift weights, and stop eating junk shit 100%
Mhm.
of the time.
Yeah.
You could throw all of this shit away and be healthy if you
Mhm.
just, but that's not like what they never, with the ADHD stuff, the first doctor that we had talked about the diet and the exercise and all of that stuff.
No,
And
that's a
then
miracle.
right. And I really liked that doctor. X moved away from that one immediately. As soon as that doctor started agreeing with me on stuff, she started taking the kids to a different doctor. And like
Yeah.
okay, like I can't win this. Like,
Mhm.
it's just fucking insane. Yeah, the medical shit is, and
Yeah. I have I have some mixed feelings about pharma because I do think that there are beneficial medicines out there, and um I'm I'm positive. I mean, I'm positive that my uh, yeah, I don't want to reveal too much of somebody else's situation, but my daughter was sick a couple years ago, and I'm positive that Zoloft saved her life. I'm positive. I'm positive. I saw it happen before my eyes. You know what I mean? She started taking that shit, and she turned around, and she was in a dark place. I mean, and so I'm grateful that that exists, and I'm grateful that we had a doctor that connected us to it, right? Um, because we went through a lot before we got there, you
I
know?
was gonna say, if I recall, y'all went through a whole lot before you got to that point, though.
Yeah, yeah, and we went through many doctors too, trying to find someone who, because I don't mind. I'm not afraid of pills. Like if drugs are necessary, drugs are necessary. But like when it comes, especially when it comes to ADHD and things like that, it's like I have a daughter with ADHD. I have ADHD myself. I'm okay with medicating it. But I'm not okay with that being the first thing we try. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you said, we can control stuff with diet, we control stuff with exercise. We can like ADD is funny, and I'm probably going down a rabbit hole, but ADD is funny because it's named so the opposite of what it is. Attention deficit disorder is really a surplus of attention. It's just your attention is locked on something, and all of your attention is focused on something that somebody else deems is not the right thing for you to be focused on, right?
And like structure and routine and stuff like that become very important when you're dealing with that sort of stuff. And that was another thing that I personally struggled with dealing with my ex. I'm very OCD, so I have to have everything structured and done in a very specific way. Like all the books on this bookshelf behind me, they're organized in a very specific way. And as soon as I walk in the door, if something has been moved, I know it instantly. Like, so structure and routine and stuff like that it's a necessity. Like I will literally have a mental breakdown. And so when we're dealing with the ADD and the ADHD stuff with him, is like, if you get some good structure and routine, it takes away some of this stuff. Like we have a lot of structure and routine and schedule, like the way we do stuff around my house, because of me a lot. My ex, they didn't have any of that. Like it was just free for all. Like you ate when you ate, you did whatever you wanted. No, there were no rules, no nothing. And it's like, if you're trying to take a kid that you think is ADHD, that is just like going to this and going to that and going to that, and you give literally no direction and no guidance, and you don't have any sort of structure or establishment to keep him into directing that hyperactivity, then yeah, it's going to be a free for all. And again, the first doctor that we went to was like, yeah, we'll do the diet, the exercise, and like get your routine down, start documenting this stuff. And then I never see her again. That's tragic. And then we end up, he ends up on all this medication anyway for stuff that, like, I fear that, yes, I'm like you. I have seen other kids that they definitely needed to be on some sort of medicine. And once they get them on the right thing at the right dose and stuff like that, it helps. It makes a world of difference. My biggest problem is, like you were talking about, like their first instinct in the pharmaceutical I was about to say in the medical industry, but it's the pharmaceutical industry. Like their first instinct is, okay, this person has this problem, so we're just going to dump these medicines on them and hope for the best. And I've seen it with my wife with a number of, she's got a mild heart condition and severe migraine thing. And like, they would just be like, okay, so you're going to take this medicine. And then when that medicine doesn't work, then we move on, and you're going to take this medicine until we decide that one didn't work. It's like, how many different like things are y'all just going to put her on until we like actually figure out what the problem is? Like figure out what the root problem is, and then you can treat the problem, as opposed to just throwing random different treatments at it and hoping to get the right one sticks.
And so that's such a common thing with pharmaceuticals, and I'm not trying to speak like, like I have some kind of credential in medicine or whatever, but like there's a certain amount of, well, okay, Captain Obvious to some of this, right? It's like you have an inflammation, so you take an anti-inflammatory, but your body's reaction was to inflame an area that's injured or being stimulated improperly, right? Because inflammation is part of your body's healing mechanism, right? It's like, so if you take anti-inflammatories, you're reducing the inflammation, but you might have needed that inflammation, right? That's what your body's doing. Now, of course, there are unhealthy levels of inflammation. There are inflammations that are caused by external factors, or where you do need to take medicine to tamp it down. But like, it's like the body, you might have. Sometimes people have headaches. I'm not trying to say your wife's migraines or anything like that, but sometimes people just get like regular headaches, And most of the time they're just dehydrated. They're just literally, people eat too much salt and don't drink enough water. Well, they eat too much shitty salt. And they don't drink enough water. No one drinks enough water. And you get headaches. Maybe we could just ask the question, how much water do you know what I mean? Here's a pill, or, okay, How much water do you drink? Oh, you drink enough water. Okay, now here's a pill. You know what I mean? Like maybe some scrutiny is in order.
Right.
Sorry, I'm going off.
I'm trying to think how to tie this back to the book also.
Right.
Because all of that kind of ties into really what we saw in the aftermath of COVID, like the COVID lockdowns and all of that stuff was probably energized people like me and you to be more involved in politics and to start trying to do things to influence people, to talk to people, to connect with people, to get out there and get people to wake up and see like, hey, this is like not good stuff that's going on. But also what happened in the aftermath with the pushing of certain pharmaceutical stuff and the really lack of vetting that went into that and stuff like that. Like all of this stuff sets the table for why you write a book like this.
Yeah, I think well, yeah, there's so much here too. I think that the COVID, when it first came out, I've always been pretty libertarian on the FDA thing. Like, okay, I believe in regulatory bodies. I don't believe that the government has the best track record of being an effective regulatory body because they're pretty much just for sale. That being said, when the what was it, Operation Warp Speed came out and they were doing like the fast tracking, and I was like, you know what? That's probably not a good idea. It probably should have a little bit more testing and a little bit more but whatever. They're trying to fast track it. But I still always saw that as like, as long as that's kept voluntary, right? And people have informed consent, okay, I if I'm very obese or I'm very elderly and I think it's a lower risk for me to take an experimental vaccine than it is for me to risk getting this illness, okay, give it to me, I'll take the risk, I'm informed. But when it came out that everything was mandated, you must do this, right? You must do this. And it turned out to be that a lot of people are just like, oh, stop it. It's not harmful, whatever. Yeah, it's not harmful for most people. But what it is not effective pretty much at all for anybody, right? And then it is harmful for some people. So that sounds like a pretty bad friggin' deal to me. So I don't know how to tie it back to the book either, but in the book, the resurrection is mandated. So the government pays for it. If you commit suicide, you still get brought back, but you have to pay for it. So that deters people from doing that. And then I have this character. He's not a main character, but I really, really like this character. And his name is Sandon, and he's a very, very massive, obese hunchback from the middle levels. Okay, so again, the surface of the Earth or the planet Earth is very overpopulated. People can't die. We've built massive skyscrapers towering above the clouds, and the people, the elites live in the top, and everybody else lives somewhere below. And this guy from the middle level, he's sort of like an organizer, a rebel. He's in the employ of the hacker Jarhead, and he's died 5 times from cancer. And he just wants to die peacefully next time and just be gone forever. And that's what motivates him. And as he's progressing through the timeline, he becomes involved with our main characters, and helps guide them to I don't want to give too much away, but he one of our who we start to think of as a bad guy in the beginning, she sort of becomes on the other side, and because she has this inside knowledge of this pharmaceutical company, this pharmatech company, she's like, oh yeah, well your illness in the first place is caused by the food you eat. It's the cricket protein. Like we have to feed, there's too many people to feed. We have to feed the crickets something, right? Half the time it's not crickets, it's probably cockroaches, but we have to feed it an artificial accelerant to stimulate the growth to develop enough protein, and it causes cancer in 20% of the people who eat it. And he said, well, why would they do that to us? Well, because you're worth more dead than alive, and the more times you die, the more money they make. So it's kind, I guess it's kind of silly, but I think the parallel is there.
Right. That is the medical industry. Who was it that said a patient cured is a customer lost?
Yeah, I've heard that, but I don't know who to attribute it to.
Yeah. So that's when you look at a lot of ways things are treated, they're not treated in a way to actually find the root cause and stop whatever's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's to put you on a monthly prescription for the thing that makes you not feel bad from whatever it is that you're dealing with.
Right.
You're not actually trying to solve the problem. You're just treating the problem over and over again so that it's not so much of a problem.
Yeah. And in this scene where he's finding this out, he's like, they're trying to go stop the bad guys from doing the bad stuff, and he's struggling because he's already obese, and but he's starting to die again, so he's losing steam. When he finds this out, it fuels his fire again. But he says or a bystander says, well, why can't they treat it? You know what I mean? And the doctor says, well, they treat it with resurrection, right? Because that's how they get paid, right? So I think that is we throw a pill at everything. That is we throw a jab at everything. It's like, well, if there's not a payday at the end of it, if you can treat that with something natural, like, some herbal based medicine, or you can treat it just through diet, through, reducing the amount of dangerously refined carbohydrates that you eat, though there's no payday at the end of that for the people who have gotten really used to, quarter over quarter growth perpetually.
It sounds like kind of an attack on the medical industrial industry. I've talked about this several times. People make a big deal about like the gun lobby, and even about like the military industrial complex.
Mm-hmm.
The number one political donor in the country to like total amount of money is the pharmaceutical lobby. And second to that is the banks and housing. So those kind of get lumped together because in banking and housing, it's talking about the stock market and stuff like that, but also mortgages and stuff like that. And the pharmaceutical lobby is a combination of the like the hospitals and big medicine, plus the actual pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies that cover health and life insurance. Like those are the biggest lobby. And it's like, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I want to say there were like 3 or 4 times more money invested into politicians than the number 2 lobby. Like those two, for as much as everybody knows about the military industrial complex and how terrible it is, it's like third or fourth, and it's not even close to touching pharmaceuticals. Like nowhere even in the same stratosphere. Like, but people don't know that. It's like when you see all of these commercials on TV, like trying to push different drugs, like there's no realm where you should go to your doctor and be like, yeah, I saw this drug on TV, and I think I've got this, so you need to I need to be prescribed that. Right. And then they would like take you seriously and do it. That that shouldn't exist. But because we have the pharmaceutical lobby is literally 3 or 4 times bigger than the next closest lobby to them, they have all the money to just be like, yeah, we can do whatever we want. And it's amazing how frequently they get sued and then are able to find loopholes to get around being sued and not have responsibility and liability for the awful shit they did. I highly recommend watching the JD Vance interview on Joe Rogan. He talks about it was really good. He talks about at one point one of these big pharmaceutical companies allying itself with a Native American tribe where they give the tribe a like percentage of their profits, and then that puts them outside of being able to be investigated or sued for different stuff because they are now tied to this Native American tribe. Like the absolute grotesque bullshit that these big pharma companies will go, like the ends that they will go to keep themselves out of liability is insane. Like if people knew about this stuff, they would be like, why do we trust these people with our lives and our health or like literally anything?
It's brilliant though. Like partnering in that way. Oh my God, my mind is blown with how brilliant that is. And I think we have this like melodramatic view of good and evil. You know what I mean? The good guys wear white, the bad guys wear black, and if they have a red lightsaber, they're the bad guy. You know what I mean? It's like we have this view of it, but like we forget that like the people who would do harm to other people for their own profit or to gain power or for whatever sick dominance game they're playing, some of these people are really, 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 really smart, and then they're capable of playing the long game, and that's really terrifying.
And the really terrifying thing is like the people who are that kind of evil and are also that level of smart also don't really have a whole lot of morals to compete with. They're not worried about the long-term impact of it outside of how is it beneficial for me and the people I represent and the things that are going to be like, it's insane.
And I think that's literally so. I think that's a psychopath. A psychopath that can't have empathy, right? That's what they do. They can't feel empathy for other people. And I think that's maybe the difference between that and a sociopath is that, the other one has power, that you're just a psychopath with control of something, that you can throw around.
Yeah.
So, and I would love to see where you're talking about like these donors, these like this, I would love to see where Big Sugar falls on that list, because the amount of influence over science, you know what I mean, that the sugar lobby has been pretty dramatic, as I understand.
I'd have to look more into that. But just the pharmaceuticals and the amount of influence and the weight that they pull is just craziness. And I do know that the food lobby is somewhere in the top 5. I'm pretty sure. And there's different ways that they get lumped together in weird ways sometimes, but the way that like the pharmaceutical lobby, the banking lobby, the way outside interests get lumped in with those. But they get lumped in there with those, and then they get to be the beneficiaries of policy decisions and stuff. And it's like constituents and what we want from our elected officials are like a fraction of what actually goes into the decisions they make. And then when you start seeing where the money comes from for the decisions that they're making, then like different stuff starts to make a lot of sense. And but that's one of the reasons that I started doing this show in I guess I started late 2020, early 2021, content talking about this kind of stuff, and trying to point out things to people just in a very like plain, matter of fact, like, look, this is what's actually going on. This is the things that they say. These are the actual details behind the things they say. Here's the information. Like, you can figure it out. You're smart folks.
Yeah.
And I feel like from the way you've kind of described your book, you're doing a very similar thing, but you're putting all of that information into a story, and it's being told from a science fiction base. So you're getting a lot of information about what's going on, but also you get it in a fun story. So it a lot of times that stuff can be more easily digestible for some people in that format. Like me sitting for 45 minutes talking about an article and going through charts and graphs and stuff, and like breaking down the numbers, that's going to drive some people away. Whereas to sit down and read a book that's an interesting story, and you have the characters and everything, and then the themes of the book tell the actual tale of reality. That's comic books, that's sci-fi, that's literature throughout human history, really, is telling the stories of what's going on in a way that's more digestible and not just somebody drilling these are the things that are happening into your head.
Yeah, especially when when you have a mainstream media, and I hate to use cliche terms, but when you have a mainstream media that constantly lies, right? So you don't know what to think. And I think that that's one thing that like the information's out there. Sometimes I look at people, I'm like, how could you possibly be so misinformed or just uninformed about, the state of politics, or, a lot of people don't even know what their candidate's platform is, but but the information's out there, you can go find it. It can be kind of hard to disseminate what's true and what's not. And like, my right-leaning source will tell me this and your left-leaning source will tell you that. And we're both probably getting fed garbage, but there is real truth out there being presented mostly by real people. And I think that's critical to why we're not in an authoritarian regime now, is because the internet came out. The people in charge weren't smart enough to see what was capable of what it was capable of becoming, and it's the most massive freedom of speech device ever created. It's the printing press by a factor of 1,000,000, of 1,000,000,000. It's in scientific notation how much of a freedom of speech device it is, and that's why they're scrambling to try to get control of it. And in my book, and I think we need this for real. And I think that Elon Musk is kind of trying to do this with Twitter and Starlink and stuff like this. But he might end up being a bad guy. So we'll just have to see how that plays out. But in the book, the hacker Jarhead, he creates this thing called the Contranet. So the main communication network in this society is called the MetaNet, right? And everyone has this sort of augmented reality space that they can do their version of social media in, right? And then but the narrative's approved. The elites control what's said, and and they have a cancel culture. Of course, they take you off if you say anything bad about them. Well, Jarhead creates this thing called the Contranet, which are like basically a decentralized internet where there are these self-replicating access nodes that just crawl like bugs all around the city, right? And so they're picking up little specks of dust and stuff like that, and basically molecularly weaving them into replicants of themselves. So even if the government tries to squash these bugs and get rid of all these little nodes, they're replicating so fast that they just can't keep up with it, and all they can do is, shake their fists at the sky. And I think that we need that. I think we need a communication source, a communication network that can't be shut down.
And I think the internet as a whole is kind of become that. It's I don't know if it was that they weren't smart enough to see and understand what it was going to become, or if they didn't give the rest of us enough credit for catching on to it and running with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they
That's
when
a
a
good point.
kid picks up something that they're not supposed to have and you're like, no, and then they just take off running, and now you're on like a mad dash to try to catch the kid who's already got a head start. Like that's the rest of us with the internet as versus the powers that be. They were like, no, you're not supposed to have that, and it's too late. We've already gone. And now they don't have any hope of catching up.
Well, I think you're right, but I think it's the people in government at the time. Like you look around the early 2000s or whatever, late 90s, early 2000s, the people in government. I don't think these people were visionaries at all. I don't think that they were not smart enough to see that, because they should have created, if they want to maintain control, right? Everyone talks about how like it used to be so great because Walter Cronkite got on the TV and he gave you the straight news and you didn't have to worry about all the fact checking. It's like, no, Walter Cronkite came on TV and fucking lied to you and told you the government approved narrative, and you just didn't have anywhere to get anything else from. Well, I think that those people, if they had wanted to keep that type of control at the time, they should have created digital broadcasting licenses at the time. They should have mandated that, the control of types of content and they could have built a whole licensing apparatus around it. They could have made money. They could have controlled the narrative. You know what I mean? They would have had it all, but they weren't smart enough. The tech guys, though, they were smart enough. They knew where it was going. And look who has the power. The government has to come crawling to them and please censor these people for us. You know what I mean? Who's got the real power?
Interesting to tie back to the book and kind of wind down a bit, and talking about using the book to tell the stories and stuff like that, and the different types of media and the way that they lie. A favorite graphic novel of mine and also a favorite movie of mine. And interestingly enough, we're coming up on my favorite holiday, which will simultaneously be Election Day, November 5th. Alan Moore in V for Vendetta said, artists use lies to tell the truth while politicians use lies to cover the truth up.
Brilliant.
That is incredibly true, especially where authors are concerned and books and stuff like that. And I'm looking forward to reading yours. Actually, I do. You had sent me like the first 3 chapters.
Don't read that. Don't read that.
Don't read that.
No, it's so different now. It's so different now.
Okay.
Yeah, don't read that. That's garbage. But interesting that you brought up the election, though, because through the timeline of the book, it follows an election, right? There's the partnership between the government and big pharma, is personified in the CEO of Life Inc. and a senator that's running for the office of the prefect, right? So basically their conversations are, the personifications of these industries and the government colluding with one another to steal this election, right? And so so it follows that whole timeline. So I really wanted to get it out before this election happened, just in case there was, it's already built on, reflecting the current state of affairs. So there might be some good stuff in there. There's kind of an homage to J6 stuff too, and that kind of thing. But if you're interested in the American election system and the way that works, this has definitely got some good stuff on that front too.
Awesome. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to it. Tell people where they can find it and when they can find it and how they can find it, and then we'll call it.
Yeah, sounds good. The easiest way to find it is to just go to Amazon, and you can either type. There's a few books with this title. There's other things with this title. In the Flesh, you can type that. The easiest way to find me on Amazon is just type my name, Clyde Myers. You can go to I have an author page. If you search me on Facebook, you can. I mean, the way Liberty people are, you could just friend my personal page. But I have an author page on Facebook, and I have a very, very embarrassingly out of date website, which is ClydeMyers.com. Or you can send me an email at Clyde@ClydeMyers.com, and I can put any links in anywhere that you want me to.
Yeah, shoot me the links and I'll include them in the show notes for the show. So anybody who's listening to the audio side of it can just click right on that. This has been excellent.
I can comment them on your YouTube.
Yeah. I'll add it to the YouTube stuff too. So links will all be out there. Clyde, thank you very much for being with me. Thank you for the talk. I am looking forward to the book, and also this has just been a good conversation about all of this shit anyway.
I've never not enjoyed talking to you. It's always very stimulating.
Thank you, sir. Have a good evening, everybody else. Enjoy the show, and I will be back next week. I haven't decided what I'm doing next week. Probably going to be doing some election coverage. Since
you better.
Since I'll be working Tuesday, I will be up all night and paying attention to the whole thing live as it happens throughout the night. So yeah, I'm sure I'll have plenty to talk about on that next week. I don't like to beat that horse, but if I'm going to do a show on election week, I may as well talk about
we do a watch party, something like that.
So Johnny, who I do peddling fiction with, may be doing a watch party that night. For me at work, even though I'll be up, the warehouse is too loud and chaotic, and there's no way I can do a stream.
Gotcha.
And I actually be able to pay attention to the stream and work at the same time. But Johnny may be doing an election night coverage stream, doing some live coverage, watch party type stuff. If that happens, I'll put links and stuff out. I'm not 100% positive if that's going to happen or not, but I feel like I can sweet talk him into it and probably convince a couple other people to participate in that as well, and get some decent content out of it. So awesome. I'm sure something will be going on that night.
Cool. Sounds great. Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate it, Justin.
Thanks again, man. Have a good one.
Bye.